What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors squares off against one of television's most seasoned journalists? And the conversation spins completely off the rails. What you're about to see is a live TV moment that sent shockwaves through the entertainment world, leaving viewers questioning everything they thought they knew about morning television. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because you're going to have an opinion on this one. The day began like any other at Good Morning America in Times Square. Producers bustled, cameras were checked, and scripts were shuffled for what was supposed to be a routine celebrity interview. Denzel Washington, two-time Academy Award winner, was there to promote his latest directorial project, already generating serious Oscar buzz. Across from him, George Stephanopoulos, veteran journalist, former White House communications director, reviewed his notes with quiet precision. Everything pointed to a polite, predictable chat. It didn't turn out that way. The cameras rolled. George smiled warmly. "Good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning America. I'm here with the legendary Denzel Washington, whose new film is already creating Oscar buzz. Denzel, thanks for being here." Denzel, sharp in a navy suit, leaned back with an easy nod. "Good morning, George. Thanks for having me." They began with the film, its themes, his role as both actor and director. "This story spoke to me," Denzel said, his voice low, deliberate. "It's about redemption, about second chances, about how we treat people who've made mistakes. These days we're quick to judge, quick to cancel, quick to write people off." George listened, then shifted. "That's interesting, because your character makes some serious mistakes. Some would say the consequences he faces are justified." A flicker crossed Denzel's face, eyes narrowing, posture tightening. "Justified according to who?" "George, that's exactly the problem. We decide who's worth forgiving and who's not, who gets a second chance and who should be cast aside forever." George leaned in. "But surely you'd agree, actions have consequences." Denzel's tone cooled, measured. "Of course they do. But who decides the weight of those consequences? And for how long? We used to believe in rehabilitation. Now it feels like we believe in eternal punishment." Sensing an opening, George pressed. "Are we talking about your character, or something more personal? Because you've been vocal lately about public figures you believe were treated unfairly." The question hung in the air. Denzel's jaw tightened. His voice carried an edge now. "We need to be careful about assumptions. I'm talking about universal principles, about the kind of society we want to live in." George didn't let go. "But you've defended controversial figures, people many would say don't deserve second chances." Denzel's hands gripped the armrests. His gaze locked on George. "There it is. Deserve. Who are you or anyone to decide what another human being deserves? Are we God now? Are we the ultimate arbiters of justice and morality?" The studio fell into an uneasy silence. Producers exchanged glances. The tension was thick enough to feel. George kept his voice even. "I'm not claiming to be the arbiter of anything. But don't we have a responsibility to hold people accountable?" Denzel didn't blink. "Accountable, yes. But there's a difference between accountability and destruction, between consequences and persecution. And if you're honest with yourself, George, you know exactly what I'm talking about." The air in the studio felt heavier now. Everyone knew. They weren't in safe interview territory anymore. Camera operators glanced toward the control booth, unsure if they should zoom in or pull wide. In the glassed control room, producers whispered in urgent bursts. This wasn't a film promo anymore. This was turning into something far more volatile. "I'm not sure I follow," Stephanopoulos said, his polite smile just tight enough to betray that he followed perfectly. Denzel leaned in, his gaze locked. "Oh, you follow George. You've been in this business long enough to know exactly how it works, how narratives get shaped, how some people are protected while others get thrown to the wolves." "Denzel, I think you might be reading more into this than necessary. George countered, trying to steer things back. Are we talking about your film and its themes, or are we, George? Denzel cut in. Because it feels like you came in with questions designed to put me in a box. To make me the poster boy for whatever story you're trying to tell. The studio air thickened. This wasn't banter. This was a challenge. George straightened his papers, clinging to the rhythm of his craft. I assure you, there's no agenda. I'm asking questions our viewers would want answered. Your viewers. Denzel echoed, his voice dipping with skepticism. What do you think they really want, George? Do they want a discussion about art? About the human condition? Or do they want you to bait me into saying something you can spin into your next viral segment? The line hit like a slap. Around them, crew members froze mid-step. George shifted in his chair, a crack forming in the decades-old composure. This is Good Morning America, Denzel. We're here for substantive conversation. Substantive. Denzel repeated, the word dripping with irony. When's the last time you used your platform to truly challenge the people in power? Not just toss them softballs while they recycle the same talking points they've been feeding you for years. For a moment, George's composure wavered. We cover serious issues every day. You cover what you're told to cover, Denzel interrupted. You ask the questions you're allowed to ask. And when someone comes here trying to have a real conversation, you steer it back to safe ground because heaven forbid people are actually challenged to think. In the control room, the executive producer's hand hovered over the go-to-commercial signal, but no one dared cut away. George's tone hardened. This network has covered every major story. We don't shy away from difficult topics. Don't you? Denzel's eyes sharpened, his voice quiet but cutting. You spent years in politics before you sat in that chair. You know how the game is played. How inconvenient truths are buried while comfortable lies get airtime. Are you suggesting we deliberately mislead our viewers? I'm suggesting you choose your stories and frame them in ways that serve your interests, not the truth. And when someone doesn't fit your narrative, you either ignore them or tear them down. The studio was silent except for the low hum of cameras. George leaned back, the warmth gone from his voice. Denzel, these are serious accusations. Do you have evidence? Denzel's laugh was short and humorless. The evidence is everywhere, if you care to look. It's in the stories you don't cover, the questions you don't ask, the guests you never invite. It's in the way you frame every issue so that one viewpoint is always on top and the others get pushed to the margins. George's jaw set. That's a convenient way to avoid specifics. You want specifics. Denzel's voice dropped, deliberate. Fine, let's get specific. Denzel didn't blink. Let's talk about the last time you had a guest who actually challenged the prevailing narrative about anything important. Let's talk about the last time you asked a politician a real follow-up question instead of letting them dodge with a canned sound bite. Or the last time you used this platform to amplify voices that don't already have power. George's jaw tightened. We give voice to people from all walks of life, people from all perspectives. Denzel tilted his head. Do you? Or do you just give voice to people from opposite ends of the same narrow spectrum of acceptable opinion? There's a difference, George. And you know it. The tension had shifted from uncomfortable to electric. Personal now, dangerous for both men, George said, his tone hardening. You're being unfair to this program and to me personally. We work hard to present balanced coverage. Balanced according to who? Denzel shot back. Balanced according to the people who sign your checks, according to advertisers who pay for this airtime, according to the political and corporate interests that make sure certain stories never see daylight. George's voice rose. Now you're crossing a line. You're making accusations you can't back up, attacking the integrity of this program and everyone who works here. Denzel leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting. Am I attacking your integrity? Or am I pointing out that in this business, integrity and survival don't always coexist? Am I attacking you? Or am I asking you to be honest about the compromises you've had to make to stay in that chair? The words landed like a physical hit. George sat back, color rising in his face, anger wrestling with something that looked like shame. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, quiet but trembling. Denzel's tone softened, but his eyes didn't waver. Don't I? I've been in this industry for decades. I've seen good people compromise themselves 1 inch at a time, until one day they look in the mirror and don't recognize who they've become. George's voice was low, almost a challenge. And what exactly do you think I've become? Denzel held his gaze. Someone who's mastered the art of asking the right questions to the wrong people, and avoiding the right questions to the right people. Someone more concerned with maintaining access than pursuing truth. Someone who's forgotten that journalism is supposed to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. George's hands clenched on the desk. You're way out of line, Denzel. You came here to promote a movie, and instead you're launching personal attacks. Personal attacks. Denzel raised an eyebrow. Everything I've said has been about your role in this system, not you as a man. But if you want to make it personal, fine. Let's talk about how you sleep at night, knowing you have the platform to make real change, but you choose to use it to protect the status quo. That's enough, George snapped, pushing back his chair. This interview is over. Denzel stayed seated, utterly composed. Isaac, or are you just going to prove my point by walking away the moment things get uncomfortable? Chaos rippled through the studio. Producers shouted through headsets. Camera operators froze. Across America, millions of viewers were watching the glossy facade of morning TV split wide open. George stood there, torn between pride and retreat, the accusation hanging like a thrown gauntlet. Sit down, George, Denzel said quietly, his voice filling the room. Let's finish this conversation like adults. But George stayed standing, hands trembling with anger. You think you can walk into my studio, onto my show, and lecture me about journalism? You're an actor, Denzel. You play pretend for a living. The insult slid off him. Denzel smiled cold and sharp. And you? From where I'm sitting, you play pretend too. You pretend to be a journalist while you're really just a corporate spokesperson with a press badge. That's it. George snapped, composure gone. Security. Get him out of here. Denzel didn't move. He sat back perfectly calm, as if the whole thing was beneath him. You're going to have me removed because I told you the truth. His voice carried clean across the studio, every syllable hitting like a bell. You're going to prove every single point I've made, Denzel said, his voice steady, by having security drag me out of here like some common criminal. You've disrespected this program. Stephanopoulos shot back, his voice trembling with fury. You've disrespected our viewers, and you've disrespected me. I will not tolerate this kind of behavior. What I've done, Denzel replied, rising from his chair with the slow, deliberate grace of a king, is hold up a mirror, and you don't like what you see in it. Two security guards hovered at the edge of the set, unsure what to do. This wasn't some disruptive audience member. This was Denzel Washington, one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. And the entire clash was playing out live in front of millions. Denzel, please. A producer called from behind the cameras. Let's just take a break, cool down, and figure this out. There's nothing to figure out, Denzel said without turning. George asked me here to talk about my film, about redemption and second chances. Well, this is what it looks like when someone refuses to be redeemed on your terms. When someone refuses to play by your rules. He faced Stephanopoulos, who was still standing rigidly behind the desk, face flushed with a cocktail of anger and humiliation. You want to know what the real tragedy is here, George. It's not that you've become a mouthpiece for the establishment. It's that somewhere deep down, you know it, and you hate yourself for it. That's why you're so angry right now. Not because I'm wrong, but because I'm right. Get out, Stephanopoulos said, barely above a whisper, but the studio mics caught every word. Get out now. Denzel nodded slowly, as if he'd expected nothing less. I'll leave. George, but not because you're throwing me out. I'll leave because I've said what I came here to say, and there's nothing left to discuss. He straightened his jacket, every movement deliberate, controlled. You know what the saddest part of all this is? I actually respected you once. I thought you were one of the good ones, someone who'd held onto some integrity in a business that chews it up and spits it out. I said get out. Stephanopoulos barked louder this time. But watching you today, Denzel continued unshaken, seeing how threatened you get when someone challenges your comfortable little world. I realize I was wrong. You're not a journalist, George. You're a performer, just like me. The only difference is I admit what I am. The security guards moved in, but Denzel lifted a hand, stopping them cold. That won't be necessary, gentlemen. I'm leaving voluntarily. Though it's fitting, isn't it, that the final image of this conversation will be me walking away with my dignity intact, while George hides behind his desk and his security guards. He began walking toward the exit, measured, unhurried. Then he stopped, turning one last time. You know what, George? I hope you watch this back later. I hope you watch it and see what your viewers saw today. Because they didn't see an out of control celebrity having a meltdown. They saw a man willing to speak truth to power, even when it cost him something. And they saw another man so invested in protecting his position that he was willing to sacrifice every principle he once claimed to believe in. Stephanopoulos gripped the desk so hard his knuckles whitened. You're delusional if you think you came out of this looking good. Denzel smiled. Genuinely, for the first time in the interview. George, I don't care how I look. I care about what's right. And what's right is calling out a system that pretends to serve the public, while it really serves itself. What's right is refusing to play along with the charade, even when it would be easier to smile, promote my movie, and collect my paycheck. He took another step toward the door, then paused again. You asked me earlier about redemption, about second chances. Well, here's your second chance, George. You could use this moment to examine what you've become, to ask yourself whether this is really the legacy you want to leave. You could choose to be better. Don't lecture me about redemption. Stephanopoulos snapped. You just burned every bridge in this industry with your little performance. Maybe I did, Denzel said with a shrug. But at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror tomorrow morning. Can you say the same? With that, he walked off the set, leaving a host who looked like he'd been hit by a freight train and a studio in chaos. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, capturing Stephanopoulos standing behind his desk, staring at the empty chair. In control rooms across the country, executives scrambled. Social media was already in meltdown mode. This wasn't just a celebrity blow-up. This was a cultural moment, something people would be dissecting for years. As Denzel disappeared through the studio doors, past stunned crew members and frozen executives, he carried himself with the same quiet dignity that had defined his career. He had come to promote a film about redemption and second chances. And instead, he had created a moment that would define both his legacy and the man he left behind. The last image viewers saw before the network cut to commercial was Stephanopoulos, still standing motionless, staring at the vacant chair. His face was unreadable. Anger, humiliation, and the faintest glimmer of recognition at a truth too uncomfortable to ignore.